good morning for Julie. We're excited to have Julie Newman with us today. Julie is a true leader in environmental planning and sustainability. Julie is the Director of Sustainability at MIT in US. With over 20 years of experience, Julie has been at the forefront of advancing sustainability in her higher education. Julie joined MIT as its first Director of Sustainability in 2013 after previously founding and leading the sustainability program at Yale University in the US. Julie's work focuses on how institutions can make sustainability a key part of their decision-making process and a long-term strategy. Julie also consults with universities globally and has been driving force in shaping how we think about sustainable development in education. So welcome to this podcast, Julie.
Good morning and good afternoon to you. So it's such a pleasure to be here, and I'm quite impressed with your work. I so enjoyed connecting with you even prior to the podcast. And so thank you for asking me about my journey, because I think it's quite unique. I've been interested in the field of environment and sustainability since actually middle school, if not even before that. And it's a little bit unexplainable at times, but actually I was quite interested, maybe like many kids at that age, in marine biology, right?
Yeah.
And really followed my passion through high school. Became a certified scuba diver when I was maybe 15, really
Wow.
interested in what lived below the surface. Then moved on to, went to the University of Michigan very purposely, where they had a renowned school of natural resources. And there I found a mentor. And I think that's one of the keys that I think is for those able to find mentors or guides along the way. I've been now able to play that role for many throughout my career,
Wow.
but found a mentor that really spoke to the way I think, which is as a systems thinker. He really was addressing environmental issues through a lens that really tried to understand what took place through the lens of culture and economics and environment and ecology, and equity, and the list goes on. Really looking at the holistic picture, and his focus at the time was rivers. Thinking about the role
Yeah.
rivers play in community and watersheds, and it was very important and formative for me. So while I was still interested in what laid below in the oceans, I became much more interested in these systemic approaches to solving environmental challenges. I went on to go into the Peace Corps in Guatemala, and was directly exposed in my 2.5 years in Guatemala and traveling throughout Latin America to some of the challenges, ranging from deforestation, to obviously poverty, women's issues, and came back trying to actually study sustainable development. So this is in the mid-90s. And it was very difficult to study sustainable development, believe it or not. It was still
Yeah.
quite new, just coming out of the Rio area, and went to grad school, and actually ended up having to get 2 degrees. And I had to bridge between biology and this wonderful environmental policy program. And I actually went back to my interest in oceans and studied fisheries, and embedded myself in a community that was dependent upon fisheries, that was looking at, again, the demise of the fisheries through the role of science and policy, the regulatory environment, the impact on the economy of that community, the culture of that community. The men went out and fished, the women stayed home. I mean, there was so much embedded in this small Massachusetts community. But again, I was trying to bring this back to my own university, where it was actually challenging to work between faculty, and ended up in, while I was in grad school, I was working also. And I worked for a group called University Leaders for a Sustainable Future, where I met my next mentor, Tom Kelly, who said, well, let's figure out how we take some of your case studies. And at that time, they were just starting to ask the question as to what the role of universities should be in understanding and advancing sustainable development. So my timing was exquisite. And I said, so I worked with Tom for 2 years on this University Leaders for a Sustainable Future that was asking this question, starting to engage universities. At the same time, I was actually trying to just study it in the university. So fascinating juxtaposition. Anyway, fast forwarding, at the end of those 2 years, he was hired to start the first Office of Sustainability in the United States at the University of New Hampshire. And I went with him to help start it, thinking I would stay a year and get him started, because we worked so well together. And I stayed 7 and got a PhD. So
Oh,
these are the moments in time
yeah.
where you have these unique paths, and you tend to follow them.
Yeah.
So that was it. I was able to be mentored, in essence, apprenticed while also studying at that point, which was my dream to kind of do both because that's how I was I'm an immersive person. I like to learn and do at the same time. And that actually is the essence of my career. Now that I'm saying that for the first time in real time, I think that's my approach to everything. I immerse myself while I'm also doing something at the same time. So I was fortunate enough to then go on after finishing my PhD, giving 7 years to UNH, went on to found the Office of Sustainability at Yale, which was just such a tremendous experience. That was still early on in the sustainability days, and then went on to was brought to MIT to launch our Office of Sustainability here. And again, it's just been a tremendous path. And in the meantime, I built networks throughout throughout the Northeast in the United States, have embedded myself in other networks in the US and helped launch a global network as well. Um, and to be honest, so much of what keeps me in this field are the people. I'm surrounded by just people who want to solve problems, build partnerships, and I really see myself as a bridge in all of this,
Yeah.
but through great humility because I'm learning every day.
That's very interesting to know and very inspiring also that what has actually gone behind like the entire behind the scenes story of your journey, right from you said you were learning, you were inspired by the status of river and scuba diving and going to Guatemala and all this journey. It's very interesting because sometimes we don't know what's going behind and what has been the real journey. So it's very
Mm,
interesting, and thank you so much for sharing this with us.
yeah.
I also learned during a previous conversation when we had earlier, and I figured out that you're a people connector, you're a networker. You like to
Mm.
speak and learn from people and
Oh,
inspire
so
people.
much.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that
And I'm still connected to my community in Guatemala. I
that's
go
really
back.
that's amazing.
Yeah. So almost 30 years later, they're
Wow.
like family.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. In
yeah,
fact, I was just looking at tickets this week. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. It's because there's a part of me, it, the way things work in the US are not, as we know,
yeah.
right? Aren't the
Exactly,
same.
exactly.
So,
Yeah,
but I think we're asking the same questions, right? We're looking
yeah,
for
exactly.
healthy lifestyles, right?
Yeah, right.
We want to build bridges. We want connections to people,
Correct, correct.
right?
Because human
And
needs
then
are same.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah,
that's uh lie. Maybe one piece I'll add because this will lead to the questions, our
yeah,
discussion.
yeah, yeah.
I came out of my PhD program,
Hmm.
or maybe I both went into it, but really let after that where what's driving my learning and I have the
Hmm.
same burning question
Hmm.
that I didn't ever fully satiate and still am working on, and that's what is the organizational structure
Yeah.
and behavior that's
Hmm.
responsive to
Yeah.
alters, informs, and influences, the climate
Yeah.
sustainability trajectory we are on.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm constantly trying to understand is
Hmm.
that intersection between the regulatory environment, the built environment,
Yeah.
human behavior,
Yeah.
economics, culture,
Yeah.
and what is it that we can just take care of behind the scenes because individuals don't want to change, and
Right.
what is
Right.
it that we have to have individuals do.
Yeah. Right.
So it's that constant, I'd say it's navigating that tension and those opportunities. I think things do have to happen systemically,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
In fact, when I run off from this today, we're managing a decarbonization forum to
Okay.
frame our own work at MIT.
Hmm.
And I'm bringing in the person responsible for the energy transition for the state of Massachusetts and
Hmm.
the person responsible for, getting to zero for the city of Cambridge, and myself, and then my team will be
Hmm.
nearby too, because
Yeah.
we have to work across these scales.
Yeah.
Right,
Correct.
we can't decarbonize as an
Yeah.
organization, as a city, and as a state independently.
Correct.
It's a
Correct.
complete intersection across them. So
Yeah.
I'm now applying my learning and really bringing it to the forefront of our work at MIT.
And your network as well. Putting your network into
Well, of
action.
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I get to be the test bed to see
Correct.
how those interactions work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that this is where, as I also understand your journey, that relationship building has been one of your core forte, which is also helping you to do these systemic changes.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's all about the people.
Yeah, yeah. Julie, what are some of the best strategies you have seen so far, weaving strategies in sustainability in the daily lives and culture at universities like MIT and Yale? These are top universities in the world, and there must be certain methods and strategies.
Well, I think maybe going back to what I was just saying,
Yeah,
one of my early lessons on is it was hard to ask people at a university to do something differently if the
uh,
university itself wasn't doing it,
yeah,
right? So
right.
if we were saying to you, we need you to, you know, I don't know, back in the days, that before laptops, right? What
Yeah,
people were asked to do was go turn off their desktop computers.
yeah,
And
yeah.
some people would turn around and say, I'll turn off my desktop computer, but this university's got to turn all the lights off at night. Like, what's
Yeah.
the value of me turning off my computer if
Mm,
all the lights of the institution are left on
mm,
all night long? That
yeah,
was a totally fair question,
yeah,
right?
yeah, right,
Because
right.
the desktop was only small. So I think the strategy that I began to embed in that exposure, again, that was 20 years ago in desktop times.
Yes.
Um, you know, now we're in data center times, right? So that's going to
Yeah,
be a
correct.
whole different challenge. So
Yeah.
we'll get to that maybe at the end. But but how do you balance what the university or the institute or the college, whatever that framing is that you relate to, what do we have to do at the systemic level to say this is actually what we're committed to? We're going to
Yeah.
put we're going to create some policies around this. We're going to make
Mm,
some investments in this. Our standards will reflect this. And then you as an individual, this is what we need for you to do while
mm,
you're intersecting on campus. And
mm-hmm.
so there's lots of examples across all of our universities where we're all trying to, fast forwarding 25 years, many of us are trying to figure out how to decarbonize the institute.
Right.
And sorry, I use the term institute at MIT. What I mean
Mm,
by that, for your audience, is university.
mm,
MIT is an institute by
right.
by trade,
Yeah.
but please, that can apply to a college, university, school. Okay.
Right. Right.
Um, so I think it's really important that if what you're asking people to do, the university is doing. So a great example, at MIT that we have is if we're asking people to say, please leave your car at home, we're
Mm-hmm.
not saying figure that out on your own. So many
Right.
years ago, we said, listen, we do need to reduce single occupancy vehicles on
Sure.
campus,
Mm-hmm.
because congestion had increased. It's
Mm,
very expensive to build parking garages,
right.
and we have, I'm not going to say excellent because we have to improve Boston's public transportation, but
Sure.
very good
Sure. Yeah.
access to trains and buses.
Mm,
So after many years and this is a great example also, excuse me, of
mm,
looking at the role of research and operations coming together.
right.
So uniquely at MIT, we actually have something called the Transit Lab, and they were actually studying this and wanting to look at behavior. What would incentivize individuals in a university to leave their car at home?
Yeah.
What were those needs? Why were people driving? Well, there are many examples of why people are driving, right? Many
Mm-hmm.
people, like myself included, have a
Yeah.
kid they have to bring to and from school, and it's hard to navigate that on public transportation. Or people were doing elderly care,
Yeah.
or people were living in places where there wasn't public transportation.
Mm-hmm.
So the researchers then said, well, let's hone in on the area where
Yeah.
we have great public transportation to in and out of Cambridge.
Mm,
And then let's look at the zip codes of where the MIT community lives,
yeah.
particularly with a focus on staff and faculty. And
Yeah.
lo and behold, a great majority of people do live within this
Mm-hmm.
range,
Mm-hmm.
and only a handful of people live further out of that.
Correct.
So
Correct.
then the strategy could then hone in on this area. So they said, what would it cost if we did a long-term investment analysis to actually incentivize and give free public transportation to everybody that works at MIT, staff and faculty, as a way to incentivize them to take public transportation? And
Mm.
they piloted it, and lo and behold, people left their cars at home because it was expensive. And they
Yeah.
also shifted the whole strategy to thinking about, rather than becoming a parker, because we all
Yeah.
tend to identify, why don't you just become a person that, a traveler, if you will, a
Right.
flexible traveler. So one day you could park and pay for that one day, as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to a parking pass for a year, which is the
Right.
old
Right.
way.
Yeah.
And another day you could say, oh, yeah, I've got flexibility today. I'm going to take the train.
Hmm.
And within a couple of years, it actually reduced our single occupancy vehicles to campus, I think within 2 years by 15%.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's a
And
lot.
then that helps us with future costs
Yeah.
um, in terms of projecting how much parking will be needed,
Yeah.
5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. It's so that because of that reduction, it stayed.
When did you start that
Now,
program?
what's that?
When did you start this program? It has been
Yeah, it was 20, I want to say 2018. It was right
okay.
before COVID.
Okay. Okay.
And we
Yeah.
were I think we were 2 years before COVID started. And then, of
Yeah.
course, and then nobody came to campus.
Yeah.
Nobody used public transportation. Then we had to regain trust on public transportation because there was a lot of fear from a public
Mm-hmm.
health standpoint.
Correct.
But
Correct.
now what's interesting is we've shifted to a hybrid system. So that combination of being hybrid in at least in
Hmm.
Cambridge, where you don't
Yeah.
have to go to campus 5 days a week,
Mm.
combined with it's like an equation. It's like hybrid, plus
Yeah. Yeah.
free access to public transportation has
Yeah.
just has reduced demand tremendously.
Okay. Do you,
Fascinating trajectory, huh?
yeah. And
Yeah.
is there any sort of incentive other than, do you also incentivize people for not taking the car?
Well, the incentive is you have free public transportation.
Yeah. Okay. Free public
Yeah.
transportation. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
That's
all
good.
free.
That's
So
good.
I don't have, yeah. So the incentive is that you have in your MIT ID, there's something called
Yeah.
a Charlie card, it's a chip.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you can go on and off of the train and the bus for free
Wow.
with that chip. So
Yeah.
that's your incentive. Yep.
Yeah. That's a
You're
big one.
disincentivized, but you have
Yeah.
to pay
Yeah. Yeah.
again, it
Yeah.
won't translate to other places, but in the
Yeah.
US, in Cambridge, which is quite expensive,
Yeah. Correct.
actually I won't quote the number, but it's it comes out of you pay daily.
Okay. So talking about the systemic level, how do you find the right balance between the urgency to act quickly on sustainability and need for long-term planning in your leadership role? Because it's a tricky situation. You have also have responsibility as a leader, but at the same time, balancing the two, how do you find it?
Mm. I really grapple with that. I mean, of course we have to act quickly, but we need to act super strategically.
Hmm.
So I think this transportation example is an example of acting pretty quickly. I mean, it took a number of years to get it up and running,
Yeah.
but this has already been going for what's that? 6 years
Right.
in as we didn't wait for Boston is investing a lot of money in the public
Hmm.
transportation system. So just
Yeah.
trying to answer your question, rather than waiting for the T and the bus system to be perfect, we
Right.
already knew that it definitely existed. We had a lot of people who were willing to take it based on a lot of surveys. So we did a lot of individual, but it
Hmm.
demonstrated that the university that MIT
Hmm.
was willing to make an investment in our own staff and faculty, having the access to that public transportation,
Yeah.
and also recognizing that there are days when a train is being, when a line might be down. So you're
Hmm.
not penalized. You just can drive that day, if that
Right.
makes
Right.
sense.
Right.
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 And
Yeah.
so, by providing that flexibility.
Hmm.
In terms of the urgency, yes, we're urgent to reduce emissions.
Hmm.
The challenge on that end, again, that's where we're working with the city and with the state. So we're
Hmm.
both working to figure out what can take place rapidly at the grid level and
Yes.
how is it that we transform our 100-year-old legacy infrastructure to be
Right.
able to decarbonize that.
Yeah.
um, Areas where we, I think, have been able to act relatively quickly has been in building design,
Hmm.
in that around building design standards, and really shifting from just thinking about how to build the building that responds to the needs of the
Yeah.
occupants, to
Yeah.
actually making sure we're building all high performance buildings. So you
Okay.
can still respond to the needs of the occupants, but in a pretty short, relatively short period of time, we're able to shift from thinking just about when I arrived. I think maybe there were one or two lead buildings on campus. That's the US
Yeah.
framing for
Right.
sustainable energy
Yes.
efficient
Yeah.
buildings. To we're up to, I think, over 25, maybe even up to 27 in a,
Hmm.
in a 10-year period.
Okay.
So to me, that's, again, it's not the only solution, but that's in the scheme of climate change, that's a pretty
Correct.
rapid,
Yeah.
shift to
Hmm.
saying, oh yes, any future renovations, buildings must begin to respond to these standards. And so, and that's a matter of also internal capacity building, learning from the outside. So our internal planning and capital construction team, I think, pivoted gracefully, and we
Hmm.
have some wonderful buildings, on campus at the moment.
Yeah.
There's a question you asked me. Oh, yeah, on the energy front, we don't need to get into this in depth, but on
Yeah.
the just in the urgency, that frames a lot of. I'll speak to MIT, but speaking with colleagues, a lot of people are looking for those dual strategies because we all know it's going to take some time to understand how to shift from fossil fuel to renewable,
Hmm.
zero carbon
Hmm.
options to make through resiliency to ensure we
Yeah.
have electricity, heat, and chilled water 24/7, at least. Again, I'm speaking from a US,
Yeah.
privileged city point of view
Yeah.
when I say that. Just want to
Hmm.
make sure I'm very aware of that. My
Hmm.
friends in Guatemala only have water a couple hours a day
Yeah,
and
exactly.
electricity. Okay. So
Yeah.
from a US research institute, they're looking for a 24/7 resilient strategy.
Yeah.
Okay. So in that context, we can't just, there's no switch we can turn at the moment. And
Yeah.
we're also have a lot of underground steam systems that need to be, basically shifted is what we're determining from steam to hot water. So
Right.
that, to your point, is going to take, from now through 2050 to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's 25 years. In the meantime, on the urgent front, MIT a number of years ago said, let's figure out how do we leverage our financial standing and
Okay.
ensure that we're investing in large scale renewable energy in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been our stance. We've actually built a consortium of other universities, cities, and healthcare
Yeah.
partners throughout the Boston area. And it's not, we haven't made this public yet because we're still working through the nuances, but with an investment of saying, how do we reduce 1 million metric tons together,
Mm-hmm.
over this period in the short term by, say, by 2026. And so everybody hopped on board on that. And that's a
Yeah.
short term way to come together to
Yeah.
leverage investment in large scale wind and solar in the US while also working on the ground, in a dense urban environment to reduce all of our individual
Yeah.
organizations in
Yeah.
the context of Cambridge, Boston, and the Commonwealth.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Does
Uh,
that
yeah,
yeah,
that
it's
makes
very
sense.
interesting.
Yeah,
It's
it's
a
very
totally different strategy.
and very complex as well because the situation is very complex. The old city and infrastructure is old at the same time. You also have a responsibility as one of the forefronts of global university and innovation center of innovation global.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's a very tricky
Yeah, it's
situation.
really
There are
interesting.
expectation,
Yeah,
but there are also legacies and there's things that you cannot just change overnight.
right,
Yeah, that brings a lot of
right.
complexity. Julie,
Yeah.
how do you see universities like MIT making a global impact on sustainability practices? Because so far we understood what you're doing at a campus level, and you are leading with examples. But at the same time, how do you see making a global impact on the sustainability practices?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm going to answer in three ways.
Sure.
Um, I want to answer from the campus perspective. I just want to say the unique platform that we launched our work on
Mm-hmm.
was looking at the scales of impact and really
Yeah.
thinking deeply from the
Yeah.
get-go
Yeah.
of how do you consider sustainability and climate impact across the role of the individual. This is what
Mm-hmm.
you've been asking me about, and the
Yeah.
organ and the campus, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
where we started
Yeah.
to the city, the state, the nation, the globe. So
Right.
from the get-go, from the moment we launched, we said we have to consider the role of the individual to the globe across these scales and back. And we kind of basically
Right.
on a daily basis, to be honest, kind of move through those scales in our dialogue.
Yeah.
And as we consider our actions. So that's part one.
Mm-hmm.
Part two is building a global network of universities so that
Mm-hmm.
there's ongoing exchange. So one impact has been just working with universities throughout the world, and sharing best practices, working with each other, and just realizing how much we have in common. And so, as we consider our actions, so that's part two is building a global network of universities so that there's ongoing exchange. So one impact has been just working with universities throughout the world and sharing best practices, working with each other, and just realizing how much we have in common and incentivizing universities around the world
Yeah.
to build offices and create commitments. I mean, just this week, well, I'm talking to you. I was on a call with a group a representative of 32 universities from Japan just yesterday morning at the same
Wow.
time. Um, and I've worked globally with this international sustainable campus network for, I think, 17 years. I've only
Okay.
missed maybe three of those meetings. And we just met again to kind of renew those commitments. And
Mm-hmm.
we're all focused on decarbonization. So that's one major way, is just be able
Yeah.
to share,
Right.
lead, demonstrate as a campus, as a test bed, what's possible, share our wins, but share our
Yes.
failures too. Be very honest
Right.
about what's working and
Right.
what's not.
Yeah.
Also teaching classes that MIT is a very global institute in terms of our
Right.
student body. So I
Yeah.
just want to say, and then there are fun things like starting next week, I'm starting a global sustainability scale. It's called a Scaling Sustainability in Higher Education platform, where I'm
Yeah.
hosting international scholars in my office for 5 to 10 days to come
Yeah.
learn from what we're doing, teach us what they're doing. That's the condition, and then go back and share that. So those
Yeah.
are just the connector
Right.
back to where we connected.
Yeah.
Those are the connector ways.
Yeah.
The other is the MIT just recently, well, MIT's been working globally. That's
Hmm.
its platform, right? It thinks
Right.
about its impact on the world. So that's just inherent, as did Yale. So
Yeah.
that's inherent in many of these institutions I've worked at. Most recently, MIT did launch something called the Climate Project, with, I believe, 6 missions that range from a policy mission to a empowering marginalized communities,
Hmm.
to cities, to air and atmosphere, strategies. To There's a wild card one that's looking at kind of cutting edge technologies and from people to technology. And underlying that mission is understanding and building frontier projects that will have impacts and thinking about global implications, and actually with global partners.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the fourth one, just in a meeting I was in yesterday, they were talking about, spin-offs that are coming out of
Yeah.
MIT that have global implications as well.
Yeah.
So there's not one answer to your
Yeah.
question. It's across
Yeah. That's
these four
that.
strategies, and it's like
Yeah.
all hands on deck and all engines are going. So
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
I mean, to the list, I could add the sixth one from Earth5R side also, that we're creating this global working group for sustainable development of cities, where we have these mayors of different cities coming together,
So cool.
CSR heads, corporate heads,
Yeah.
and then head of educational institutions. We would invite you also to be part of and lead that forum, because new products are coming, new research work is happening, and
Oh, cool.
yeah, and this is how we
Yeah.
advance sustainability together.
Don't you think? I wonder, something it doesn't, I want to say it keeps me up at night, but
Yeah,
something I've been concerned about. Well, let me say that again. Something I'm very curious about.
yeah,
Um, and I kind of have a sense you are too with your podcast and the way that you work.
yeah,
I'm curious before I become concerned. That there's a lot of replication. A lot of people are
correct,
driving.
correct.
Like I went to Climate Week in New York City,
Hmm.
and I went and sat in both in industry. I spent the day with an industry group called Climate Group, doing amazing work with industry.
Yeah,
And then I went to one, something called the Earthshot Prize, doing amazing work with innovators and
right,
philanthropists.
right,
And the great news is there's a lot of crossover.
correct.
There's zero bad news, zero.
Hmm.
I'm just completely inspired. I was
Yeah,
totally inspired by the work we're doing on campus and our partners to that. And my curiosity and my hope in terms of my contribution is there's a lot of things happening that are the same. And
yeah,
I'm curious on how we might do a better job optimizing
exactly. Which is
together
why,
because,
yeah, which is
yeah.
why we need to break the silos and come together and share the best practices, and
Hmm.
work together,
Don't you
and
think?
you're, yeah, rather than and
Yeah.
that is why I always like the word you always use, and we use the same word last time also, all hands on the deck, which is
Yeah. Yeah.
collaboration. Yeah.
All egos at the door, hands
Yeah.
on deck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where are we replicating? Where can we
Yeah.
learn from each other?
Yeah.
And I don't know how to solve that. And the hard part, I think my interest in where I've stayed on, in that university system and embedded again in the city and the state, like we're
Yeah.
demonstrating today,
Yeah.
is we know that there's not like one global
Hmm.
answer, right? You have to pull it down into that local regulatory, I mean, I had the opportunity to spend some time at Oxford back in March,
Yeah.
and they're talking about infrastructure that's 700 years old. Here
Yeah.
we are saying, what do we do with 600, excuse me, 100-year-old
Yeah. Right.
infrastructure, and how do we
Right.
evolve that? They're
Yeah.
saying we have buildings that are 700 years old that we want
Yeah. Yeah.
because of the cultural heritage and the integrity.
Yeah.
What do we do with that? So I think, again, that demonstrates that we can all ask the same questions.
Yeah.
I don't think, they're talking about geothermal just like we are. They're looking
Yeah.
at building materials just like we are. But to their, they need to deal with, heritage and understand from
Exactly.
legacy in a
Exactly.
different, that's going to be different where you are. So
Exactly.
there's so much we have in common, and then you
Yeah.
need to bring it,
That
to
is why
bring
we
it
need
down,
we need to
right?
get together. And on that note, what is interesting, you're talking about Oxford. The sustainability director of Oxford is also is coming on the podcast. So probably
Oh,
we should do it
she's
together.
amazing.
We should do it
Well,
together.
you tell her I said hello.
Yeah, yeah.
They're doing remarkable work there, and
Right,
just have a
yeah.
different, again,
Yeah.
so much in common.
Yeah.
Well, she can speak to her work, but
Yeah.
exposure to just a different set of challenges. I'm going to have to email her today and say hello. But
Yeah.
again, there's the connector example.
Yeah.
There's many of us have gotten to know each other in this role around the
Mm.
world,
Yeah.
and if we don't know each other, it takes one call to feel like you've known each other for a long
Exactly.
time. It's
Exactly.
amazing.
Yeah.
Maybe I think this is part of what I felt with you right away as well.
Mm.
It's so important to figure out how to build trust. I mean, I
Correct.
do think that's at the heart of these
It
solutions.
is.
There's
It is.
there's technology, and then there's this trust building and a willingness to find those optimal ways of communicating and sharing. And it's not going to be technology alone. Yes, we need amazing innovations. I'm going to rely on my colleagues that know how to suggest new engineering,
Yeah.
strategies and models. But we have to demonstrate that we have
Ex
essentially complementary skill sets between the innovative climate
Right.
tech,
Yeah.
engineering solutions combined with the people,
Yeah.
regulatory organizational structure. And that's the sweet spot.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And sorry, and a complete respect for heritage and culture.
Exactly. That is where the regional, these little things that are regional practices and local
Yeah.
practices come into picture. Talking about that,
Yeah.
Julie, how do you see the exchange of sustainability knowledge between institutions like MIT and universities in city like Mumbai or Delhi shaping global approaches to environmental challenges? Because as we discussed earlier, that we're all same, we all have basic requirements, but there are different
Mhm.
campuses and different approaches to doing things.
Yeah. To me, it's all about, inquiry and design. It's all about asking questions. It's not coming in and saying, oh, this is what we're doing at MIT,
Yeah, yeah,
at Mumbai. This is what you should do.
yeah,
That's so far from my, way I
yeah,
work. It's all about relationship building,
yeah,
finding common ground.
yeah.
I think there are things that we can all have in common, but it
Mm-hmm.
might just be culturally different.
Mm,
So, I've built I kind of have built a strategic sustainability leadership model over the years
mm,
that I think relates to wherever you are. And so it's
mm-hmm.
around thinking about, what is that? What are the driving questions? My driving question that I shared with you earlier
Mm-hmm.
might be different from the one in Mumbai. And I would ask that, what is your underlying driving question? So I can understand your lens on how to solve for this. Um,
Mm-hmm.
how do you navigate in your own culture inquiry and design? So you're going into it with curiosity
Yeah.
and in order to frame the challenges. So I mean, I can quickly run through just as an example. I think about
Yes.
what are the common scientific models that inform our thinking? What are the implications
Mm-hmm.
for Mumbai? They're going to be different in Cambridge. So we would look at that together. We think about what goals then and might you set, and how do you plan across the scales I shared with you
Yes.
earlier from your vantage point.
Yeah.
What are those city university partnerships that you have in
Right.
Mumbai? Right?
Yeah.
That we're asking.
Yeah.
What are the opportunities for collaboration, and how do you hold yourselves accountable? Because you don't want to ever set goals that you can't
Correct.
hold yourself
Correct.
accountable to.
Yes.
are there opportunities for test beds you can start to model to your community and the
Hmm.
population how you're going to go about doing this? This may be different in India. I would love to learn in a future
Yeah.
discussion than in
Yes,
the
yes.
US, but there's a lot of focus right now on centering equity and justice.
Mm-hmm.
I assume it's quite the same, but really
Yeah,
making sure we're putting people at the heart, that we're not
that's
replicating
true.
solutions from the past where we
Yes.
marginalized
Hmm.
or had, or harmed people
Yeah,
along the way. So really centering climate equity and justice. And then, of course, we have to implement and really make sure that you're bringing the implementers into the decision process,
correct.
throughout
Very
that.
important.
So
Yeah.
those are the 7 ways, the
Hmm.
kind of the 7 steps. They don't have to be linear per se,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I check myself on those throughout.
Nice. Wow. So one more question before we, because I know you're busy, you have to
Yeah,
go
yeah.
somewhere. Yeah. How can universities better prepare students for career into sustainability, ensuring that they have the right skills and knowledges to thrive in both
Great question.
academia and yeah, industry both?
Yeah. There's a lot of focus on that. I love that question because that's how I came into this myself.
Yeah,
I've
correct.
seen a proliferation. In fact, a friend just sent me because they knew my frustration at getting my master's degree, trying to study this, that the place I actually went is now has a master's, like one of the top 10 for masters of sustainability.
Wow.
That was at, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
so just keep in mind, universities can evolve. Um,
Right.
I think there's a variety of ways. I think it's ensuring that sustainability is integrated into coursework,
Hmm.
regardless of your major, throughout universities. And there are many, many examples of that. We're just taking stock at MIT right now,
Hmm.
for this national rating system to understand how many courses throughout the university, throughout the institute offer,
Hmm.
integrate sustainability, climate skills,
Hmm.
knowledge into that. So I think coursework, obviously degrees. I think there are more and more universities throughout the world in which you can get so-called
Hmm.
degrees, and it doesn't mean you need to go become a sustainability major.
Right.
That's not it. It's understanding that if you're going to become an architect, sustainable design is intersected. If you're
Right.
going into finance, you're understanding the implications of ESG,
Hmm.
social, environmental, and social, investments. If you're going to engineering, you've got sustainability and climate integrated, into your
Right.
learning. The humanities, right? I mean, think about the state of the world right now. The humanities, they've got to
Yeah.
be embedded in art, in how we
Right.
think about literature, and how we look back at history and
Right.
project forward in terms of the
Yeah.
state of the world. So anyway, I could go on, but I
Hmm.
think it's going to be that combination of classes, intersection with degrees, because this is a multidisciplinary challenge. This isn't about becoming, yes, there's going to be people who go into the field directly, like
Hmm.
myself.
Hmm.
But it's going to have to be this kind of all hands on deck, that approach, where we
Yeah.
have all majors exposed to these challenges. And think about the regulatory environment, and people in parliament, and people in town councils, right? They're making decisions that impact our lives on a daily basis. And then
Right.
you think about the folks, managing Amazon and, right, Microsoft. They do have sustainability, like they're actively engaged, but those are big challenges that they're leaving us with around, consumption, right, and the circular economy. So I think we've got some challenges on our hand, and I think universities have to continue to step up and both think about how to educate. We have to demonstrate. We have to build student mentorships, student research, student
Hmm.
opportunities to travel, to also see how this
Right.
is being impacted and influenced in the world.
Hmm.
So I feel proud to be in higher education. I've purposely have chosen
Right.
that as my
Right.
career path, and because we can also intersect with, you know, the regulatory and the industry
Yeah.
environment alike.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Julie, any message for
All
the
right.
volunteers of Earth5? There are 58,000 of them who are currently using these apps to Earth5 app in the localities, in the areas to measure the pollution and make their localities better place. So any word of message for
Wow.
them?
Well, I'm indebted to the work that your team is doing, on a daily basis. Continue to be connectors and bridge builders. Assume good. Really try to demonstrate and continue to provide just the inspiration for the people you're surrounded by, and help people build knowledge to action, demonstrate, help people really understand the data that you're collecting and the implications it has to their own lives, and invite them in to join you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Julie. It was really amazing speaking to you. We learned a lot,
Yeah,
some very interesting
good.
information about systemic changes and how a university like MIT is changing the face of sustainability. Thank you so much. We look forward to
Great.
talking you more in our working group in the future. Thank you.
Oh,
Have a
I
good,
really hope so. All
yeah,
right.
have
Thank
a
you
good
so
day.
much. Such a
Good day.
pleasure to see you.
Likewise. Amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, good day.